Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for, well, quite an intellectual journey. It's not just about quant finance, though that's definitely in the mix.
Mm.
It's really about how we know things, how we tell the difference between, like, a useful story and the actual truth, and maybe, most importantly, the power of the human mind itself.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're diving into a really fascinating address given back in 2009. It was by Emmanuel Derman, the quant legend over at Bloomberg.
And the focus, the legacy of another giant, Fischer Black.
Exactly. But Derman used Black as, almost a philosophical launch pad to explore these really deep questions about understanding itself. It gets pretty rigorous looking at how we structure reality.
Right.
What's a tool we build versus, well, what is?
Okay, so our mission today sounds simple, but I suspect it's pretty deep. We want to unpack Derman's ideas about models versus theories. He draws some really sharp lines, sometimes kind of counterintuitive ones.
Yeah.
And then there's this huge theme, intuition. But not intuition like a random hunch. We're talking about something earned, something intense, essential for mastering really complex stuff, whether that's physics or trading or even, understanding people.
And Fischer Black is the perfect person to center this on. Everyone knows Black's goals, right?
Yeah.
A pillar of modern finance.
Sure.
But Derman really drives home that Black was so much more than just that model. He was a radical thinker. He got the limits, the sort of metaphorical nature of the very tools he helped create. A philosopher of the quant world, almost.
Yeah, and Derman kicks off with these quotes from Black that they immediately make you question everything, especially about how we do research, how we test things in fields like economics or finance. It's incredibly skeptical stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. How much academic firepower goes into testing models? Statistical significance, p-values, all that.
Right, the standard playbook.
Black just turns it on its head. He says something like, it's better to estimate a model than to test it. And then, even better, best of all, though, is to explore a model.
Explore. That's such a different word than test. Testing sounds like you're trying to prove it right or wrong, like definitively.
Exactly. Falsification, validation, that's the usual goal.
But explore sounds like
Yeah.
you're wandering through it, seeing what's there, treating it like a landscape, maybe,
Yeah.
not a blueprint you have to follow rigidly.
That's a great way to put it. And he really doubles down. He says that for real-world research, those standard statistical tests, they seem almost worthless.
Wow, okay. That's bold. Why worthless?
Well, think about the real world, especially finance. It's messy, right? Things change constantly. People aren't perfectly rational. The rules shift.
Yeah, it's not a clean physics experiment.
Exactly. And those statistical tests, they usually rely on pretty clean, static assumptions. Assumptions that just don't hold up a lot of the time in the wild. So Black's saying, look, the test isn't telling you much about reality because reality doesn't fit the test's neat little box.
So if testing is out, or at least downgraded, what does exploring mean in practice?
I think it means using the model pragmatically, but with deep skepticism.
Yeah.
You turn it over, push its boundaries, see where it actually helps you understand something.
Okay.
And crucially, you identify where it breaks. Where does the map stop matching the territory? It's treating the model as a tool, a useful approximation, never mistaking it for the gospel truth.
That skepticism seems key, and it perfectly sets up the main event, right? The core distinction Derman wants to make.
The big one, models versus theories. What's just a useful approximation and what's describing something fundamental?
All right, let's dive into that, because understanding this difference feels like the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. Part 1, defining reality models versus theories.
Okay, so Derman's framework starts here. What's the fundamental purpose, the language, of a model? He argues pretty forcefully that models are basically metaphors.
Metaphors. So their whole job is to compare.
Exactly. You take something you don't really grasp, maybe something complex or new, and you compare it to something you understand a bit better, just to get some initial insight, some direction.
Derman calls them toys, right? Intellectual toys.
He does. Think about the early days of computers. Huge machines doing calculations. How do you explain that to someone?
Right, you need an analogy.
So engineers call them electronic brains. The brain was the known thing, the computer the unknown. That metaphor helped people get a handle on what the computer did. It casts some light.
But the danger, the toy risk, as Derman puts it, is forgetting it's just a comparison, forgetting it's a crutch.
Precisely. And sometimes the metaphor gets so popular it flips.
How do you mean?
Well, once computers became more familiar, the analogy reversed. Now, how often do we hear the brain called a computer? A biological computer or a neural network?
All the time.
And Derman says, look, That model is useful for studying, say, memory or processing. But the brain itself, it's vastly more complex and different than any machine we've built. It's a model, a useful one sometimes, but it's not the thing itself.
It only tells you what the brain is more or less like.
Exactly. And the moment you drop that more or less like, you've fallen into the trap. That's model risk right there. Confusing the map with the territory.
And Derman points out that the best metaphors, the really powerful ones, they don't just illuminate one side, they sort of expand our understanding of both things in the comparison. He uses this amazing example from Schopenhauer about sleep.
Oh yeah, the Schopenhauer quote is fantastic. It's dense, but worth unpacking. He said, "Sleep is the interest we have to pay on the capital, which is called in at death."
Okay, let's slow down there. So life itself, our consciousness maybe, that's the capital. The principal amount we start with, like a loan.
That's the idea. And death is when the loan gets called in. Redemption, the final payment.
So sleep is the interest. What does that mean? What are the properties of interest payments in finance?
Well, two key things, right? They're necessary, you have to pay them, and they're periodic, they come due regularly.
Ah, okay. So Schopenhauer is focusing on that periodicity, the daily, unavoidable need for rest.
Exactly. He's taking that known financial structure, regular necessary payments on a loan, and extending it metaphorically to life itself. Life is borrowed from, well, the void maybe. And sleep is the fee we have to pay regularly to keep the loan going, to postpone that final redemption date.
It completely reframes existence as this kind of ongoing financial obligation. It's a powerful model.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this connects to a more technical idea Derman brings in from mathematics, something called analytic continuation, which sounds scary, but the concept is similar to a good metaphor.
Analytic continuation.
Right.
That's like taking a function that you only understand in a really specific small area.
Like, say, only for whole numbers, integers.
And then figuring out its underlying rules, its structure, so you can extend it to a much bigger space. Like make it work for fractions or even complex numbers.
Precisely. The classic example is Euler and the factorial function. 3 factorial is 3 times 2 times 1, which is 6. 4 factorial is 24. It only makes sense for positive whole numbers.
Right. How can you have half a factorial?
But Euler found a way. He looked at the relationships, the recursive properties, and extended the concept into what we now call the gamma function. The gamma function works everywhere, even for 12 factorial. It continues the pattern analytically.
Okay, I think I see the link. Schopenhauer did something similar. He took the known pattern of periodic financial interest and analytically continued that structure onto the much vaguer, broader concept of life and sleep.
Exactly. Both are forms of metaphorical extension, using a known structure to illuminate an unknown domain. That's what a really good model does. It expands insight.
And this is the crucial, but even the best, most illuminating metaphor.
It's still just a toy, as Derman warns.
Right. Schopenhauer's analogy is brilliant, but life isn't actually a loan in the same way a mortgage is. Finance is just the thing we understand better that we're using for comparison.
And the big mistake, the core of model risk, is when you forget that, when you think the toy is the reality, when the map becomes the territory in your mind.
Which leads us directly to the other side of the coin, theories. If models compare, what do theories do?
Theories don't compare. They don't need an analogy. Theories, in Derman's view, describe and explain the thing itself. They stand on their own. They are the territory, or at least our best possible map of it.
And to show what a real theory looks like, Derman shifts gears completely. He takes us out of finance, out of philosophy, and into physics. Specifically to Paul Dirac and the Dirac equation in 1928.
Yeah, this is like the gold standard example of a theory doing what theories are supposed to do. Dirac was trying to create an equation for the electron that worked with both quantum mechanics and Einstein's special relativity, a unification job.
Trying to get the two biggest ideas in physics at the time to play nice together.
Right. And the equation he came up with was, well, mathematically beautiful. But it produced 4 kinds of solutions.
4? What were they?
2 of them were great. They perfectly described the electron everyone already knew about: negative charge, its spin properties, fit like a glove.
Okay. But what about the other 2?
That was the problem. The math absolutely insisted on 2 other solutions. But these solutions described particles with, well, negative energy.
Negative energy? What does that even mean physically? Sounds weird, unpleasant, as Derman says.
Exactly. It was baffling. If these things existed, why wouldn't electrons just keep falling into lower and lower negative energy states, releasing energy infinitely? The universe should collapse, kind of.
So most people would probably just say, okay, the math is weird here, these solutions aren't real.
Maybe. But Dirac took the math seriously. He had faith in the equation structure. He felt he had to explain these negative energy states. And this is where the pure theoretical leap happens. He proposed the Dirac sea.
The Dirac sea. Okay, what's that?
He basically said, what if the vacuum, what looks like empty space, isn't empty at all? What if it's completely filled up, infinitely deep, with electrons in these negative energy states?
Whoa. Okay. An infinite sea of invisible negative energy electrons just everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Like an ocean that's so full and uniform we don't notice it.
Why wouldn't we notice it? An infinite number of charged particles.
Because it's full. You only notice changes, things moving, things appearing or disappearing. If the sea is absolutely full and perfectly uniform, it just forms the background, the default state of reality. Like a fish maybe doesn't notice the water, it just lives in it.
Okay. It's a wild idea. But does it do anything? Does it predict something?
Ah, yes, that's the key. Dirac reasoned. If this sea exists, what happens if you hit one of those negative energy electrons in the sea with enough energy, say, from a high-energy photon?
It could knock the electron out of the sea, give it positive energy.
Exactly. It would pop out into our observable world as a regular electron with positive energy.
Okay.
But if you take an electron out of the sea, what does it leave behind?
It leaves a hole, an empty spot where a negative energy electron used to be.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A hole in the Dirac sea. Now think about what that hole is. It's an absence of negative energy.
Which behaves like positive energy.
And an absence of negative charge.
Which must behave like positive charge. It's like an anti-electron, a positively charged electron.
Bingo. The hole is a particle with the same mass as an electron, but with a positive charge. And 4 years later, in 1932, Carl Anderson, studying cosmic rays, discovered exactly that particle. He called it the positron.
Wow. So the theory didn't just explain known stuff. It reached out and predicted something totally new, something unseen, based purely on its own logical consistency.
That's the power of a true theory. It wasn't a metaphor. Dirac wasn't saying the electron is like X. He was saying the mathematical structure demands the existence of both the electron and the positron. Derman's conclusion is stark. An electron is the Dirac equation.
The theory is the reality. It stands alone. I am that which I am, as Derman puts it.
Theories tell you what something is. Models just tell you what it's more or less like. And the danger, especially in finance, is treating our simplified models, which often assume things like constant volatility or rational actors, as if they were Dirac equations. They're not. They're useful metaphors maybe, but they are not fundamental truth.
That distinction is incredibly clear now. Model as analogy, theory as self-contained reality. Okay, that gives us the perfect toolkit to shift focus. Can we apply this kind of rigorous theoretical thinking to something much messier than physics, like us, human behavior?
It seems like a huge leap, right? From the clean world of electrons to the chaotic world of human feelings. But Derman argues that, remarkably, there was a philosopher in the 17th century who tried to do exactly that. To apply that same kind of rigorous, deductive, axiomatic structure to human emotions and ethics.
You're talking about Baruch Spinoza and his book, The Ethics, which is famous for being written almost like a geometry textbook. Proofs, axioms, propositions.
Exactly like Euclid's Elements. Spinoza's ambition was just immense. He wanted to derive the laws of human behavior and ethics purely from first principles, using logic. No appeals to divine whim, no simple comparisons.
So critically, he wasn't using a model. He wasn't saying the mind is like a machine or emotions are like weather patterns. He was trying to build a theory directly from observing humans as they are.
Precisely. He started by trying to identify the absolute bedrock. If you're building a theory from the ground up, you need your fundamental units, your primitives. What are the most basic, irreducible components of human feeling?
Okay, so what did Spinoza land on? What are the base elements?
He proposed 3 core affects or feelings: pain or sadness, pleasure or joy, and desire. That's it. Everything else, all the complex emotions we experience, love, hate, envy, hope, fear, he argued, are derived from these 3, logically combined or associated with external things.
Derived. This is where Derman talks about the derivative structure of Spinoza's theory, right? Like financial derivatives are built on simpler underlying assets.
Exactly the same idea. Complex emotions are derivative products constructed from the underliers: pain, pleasure, and desire.
Okay, let's walk through some examples. How does this actually work? How do you get from, say, pleasure to something like love?
It's about association. For Spinoza, love is simply pleasure associated with an external cause or object. You feel pleasure, and you link it mentally to a specific person or thing outside yourself. That combination is love.
Simple, clean. And hate must be the flip side.
Just swap the primitive. Hate is pain associated with an external cause. Again, a basic feeling linked to something outside. It's axiomatically defined.
Okay, that makes sense for relatively simple emotions. But what about something more complex, something involving other people's feelings, like envy?
Right. Envy requires another layer. Spinoza defines envy as pain at another's pleasure. So the subject feels the primitive, pain, but the trigger for that pain is the perception of someone else experiencing the opposite primitive pleasure.
Wow. Okay, you can see the logical structure. My pain plus your perceived pleasure is envy. It's derived.
It is. It's a deductive step. Pain is the underlier. The perception of external pleasure is the condition. Envy is the resulting derivative emotion.
That's remarkably precise for psychology, especially 17th century psychology. What about emotions dealing with the future, like hope or fear? They seem different.
Spinoza handles those by introducing the element of uncertainty, linked to desire. Let's take fear. Fear is defined as pain associated with a future external cause concerning which we doubt the outcome.
Okay, break that down. There's pain, the primitive. There's something external in the future that might cause it, but critically there's doubt, uncertainty.
Right. If you were certain the bad thing would happen, it wouldn't be fear. It would be, well, despair or agony, maybe. The doubt is essential to the definition of fear.
And hope must be the mirror image then. Just swap the pain for pleasure.
Exactly. Hope is pleasure associated with a future external cause concerning which we doubt the outcome. Same structure, just substituting pleasure for pain as the base primitive. Spinoza is showing the underlying logical form defines the relationship, independent of whether it feels good or bad.
It's like the mathematical framework is the real insight.
It really is. And then Derman highlights one of the really dark, complex ones Spinoza derives, cruelty. How do you build that from primitives?
Yeah, how does that work? It seems like more than just simple pain or pleasure.
It involves a painful internal conflict. Derman paraphrases Spinoza's definition as something like the perception of the desire to inflict pain on someone we love.
Oof. Okay, so that requires multiple elements. You need love, which is pleasure associated with the object.
You need the primitive of desire, the active impulse.
Yes, and that desire is aimed at causing pain to the very object you associate with pleasure.
Right. It's this terrifying contradiction built right into the definition. The cruelty arises from the tension between these fundamental axioms, loving something and desiring to hurt it simultaneously.
By building this whole system, defining primitives, deriving complex states through logical association and conditions, all without resorting to analogy, Spinoza created something that, in Derman's view, qualifies as a theory of human emotion. It starts with humans as they are and builds its own self-contained explanatory structure.
And what Derman clearly admires is that rigorous, almost mathematical method. It doesn't matter if it's Dirac figuring out the positron from an equation or Spinoza deriving envy from first principles. The common thread is that unafraid hard thinking applied relentlessly to the subject itself.
That kind of thinking, it feels rare, and it seems connected to that other quality Derman prized in Fischer Black.
The intuition.
Exactly. Which brings us right to the core theme. How does intuition fit into all this? Is it related to this kind of theoretical thinking? Exactly.
Yeah, intuition. It's a word we throw around a lot, often meaning jest.
I guess.
Right, a lucky hunch. Maybe a flash of insight that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it gets romanticized. But Derman, channeling Spinoza and thinking about Black, presents intuition as something completely different, something much more earned, almost gritty.
Definitely. He quotes Derman's admiration for Black's reliance on unafraid, hard thinking, intuition, and no great reliance on advanced mathematics. That pairing is really interesting, hard thinking and intuition, with math perhaps taking a slight backseat.
So the intuition isn't replacing the hard thinking, it's maybe the result of it.
That seems to be the idea. And Spinoza puts intuition at the absolute pinnacle of knowing. He says the highest endeavor of the mind and the highest virtue is to understand things by the intuitive kind of knowledge.
Higher than just opinion, higher than reasoning things out step by step.
Even higher than logical deduction in Spinoza's hierarchy.
Yeah.
But, and this is the absolute key point, that Derman hammers home, this top-tier intuitive knowledge is not casual. It's not lazy thinking.
Okay, so what is it then, if not a lucky guess?
It requires, Derman and Spinoza argue, intimate knowledge. The kind of deep familiarity you only get through massive effort, through painstaking observation, through mastering all the details, the formalism, the equations, the rules, and the content, the messy, specific reality of whatever you're studying, and doing that over a really long time.
So it's not about skipping the hard work. It's about doing so much hard work that something else becomes possible. You have to internalize everything first. The math, the data, the history, the quirks.
Exactly. You have to absorb it all. And the endpoint of all that effort, the state where true intuition becomes possible, Derman defines in a really profound way. He calls it a merging of the understander with the understood.
A merging. Wow, what does that mean? The person studying the system becomes one with the system.
In a sense, yes. The boundary dissolves. The physicist has internalized the laws of motion so deeply, they don't just calculate trajectories, they feel them. The philosopher has wrestled with the axioms of ethics so long, the logical consequences become self-evident. The expert trader understands the market dynamics so profoundly, they sense shifts before the data confirms them.
So in finance, this merging is what separates someone who can just plug numbers into the Black-Scholes formula from someone like Black himself, who could see the underlying reality the formula was trying to capture.
I think that's exactly it. Black's breakthrough wasn't just math wizardry. It was this deep, intuitive grasp of the connections between things, how equities like an option on the firm's assets, how you could replicate an option with a dynamic portfolio of the underlying, and cash.
Well,
That conceptual leap came from merging his understanding of economics, finance, and even physics.
it sounds almost mystical, but grounded in intense work. Spinoza, Derman suggests, would say God's understanding is purely intuitive. Why? Because there's no separation. God is the system.
Right. For God, there's no boundary between creator and created, knower and known. So the understanding is total, immediate, intuitive. When a human achieves true mastery in a field, they approach a tiny sliver of that unified state within that specific domain. The separation diminishes.
And from that state of merged understanding, you can see things others can't. You can anticipate, you can connect disparate ideas, you can sense the underlying structure. You don't just calculate,
You develop a feel for the system's internal logic. You might not even be able to articulate why you know something initially, but the conclusion feels necessary, inevitable, because the system has become an extension of your own thinking.
But getting to that state requires incredible focus, sustained mental effort that seems almost impossible in our modern, hyper-distracted world.
Absolutely. Which leads Derman to think about the sheer power, the almost physical endurance required to build up what he calls the muscles of intuition.
Muscles of intuition. I like that phrase. It implies strength, training, effort. And to illustrate the kind of mental power we're talking about, Derman brings in maybe the ultimate example, Isaac Newton, but seen through a surprising lens.
Yeah, not just Newton the scientist, but Newton as seen by John Maynard Keynes, the economist. Keynes gave this speech in 1946, after Newton's tercentenary, and he had had access to this private box of Newton's papers.
And what was in the box wasn't just calculus and optics.
Not at all. It was filled with stuff on alchemy, biblical prophecy, complex chronologies, trying to date the creation of the world, mystical writings. It was, well, weird.
Not the image of the cool, detached father of the Enlightenment we usually get.
Definitely not. And Keynes looked at all this and came to a radical conclusion. He said we shouldn't see Newton as the first great figure of the age of reason. Instead, we should see him as the last of the magicians.
The last magician? What did he mean by that?
Keynes thought Newton approached the universe with the same mindset as the ancient Babylonians or Pythagoras, believing the universe was a riddle, a secret code set by God, full of hidden connections and occult truths that could be deciphered through intense focus and, yes, intuition, not just through experiments you could easily replicate.
So Newton was looking for the unified theory of everything, including the mystical bits.
Kind of. And Keynes argued that the key to Newton's unbelievable breakthroughs wasn't just his intellect, which was clearly off the charts. It was something else, something rarer.
What was it?
His almost inhuman capacity for continuous, concentrated introspection.
Okay, that sounds intense, like mental endurance.
Exactly. Keynes described it as this power to hold a purely mental problem. Not scribbling equations, but holding the problem itself in his mind continuously, fixedly, until he'd seen straight through it.
Just holding it there, without distraction. For how long?
Keynes implies for hours, days, maybe even weeks on end, for the really big problems like gravity, just turning it over and over in his mind, probing it from all angles, until the underlying structure, the solution, became completely clear to him.
That level of focus is, frankly, unimaginable today. Most of us struggle to focus for 10 minutes without checking our phones.
Right. So Keynes suggests Newton's real edge wasn't just being smarter, but having this incredible mental stamina. He famously said Newton's preeminence was due to his muscles of intuition being the strongest and most enduring with which a man has ever been gifted.
Muscles of intuition, there it is again, forged through relentless, sustained concentration.
And this intense internalization means the answer, the intuitive leap, often comes before the formal proof. The knowing precedes the showing. Derman uses that great anecdote about Newton and Edmund Halley to illustrate this.
Halley, the comic guy.
That's him. So Halley visits Newton, I think in Cambridge, and asks him a question that had been vexing all the top minds. If gravity pulls things towards the sun with an inverse square law force, what shape would the planet's orbits be?
A huge question, the foundation of celestial mechanics.
Right. And Newton, apparently completely nonchalantly, just says, oh, they travel in ellipses.
Just like that, after everyone else was stumped.
Just like that. And Halley, being a good scientist, is stunned. He asks the obvious question. How do you know that? Have you proved it?
Yeah, show me the math.
And Newton's reply is just the perfect encapsulation of this idea of intuition preceding proof. He says something like, well, I've known it for years. If you'll give me a few days, I'll certainly find you a proof of it.
He knew it. The calculation, the formal derivation was almost an afterthought. Necessary to convince others, maybe, but the discovery itself happened internally through that intense, intuitive process.
Exactly. The problem was already solved in his mind through that merging, that sustained introspection. The mathematical proof was just writing it down for everyone else. It wasn't part of the discovery process itself.
That's incredible. It really validates Derman's point about intuition being this deep, hard-won insight, not just a guess. It's the end point of extreme mental effort.
And it connects to the other major quality Derman saw in Fischer Black, this ability to see things clearly without sentimentality, which probably requires that kind of focused internal grounding.
Right, the realism.
Yeah.
Derman called Black a consummately unsentimental realist, unafraid to see and take the world for what it is. That sounds like a crucial attitude, especially if you're dealing with something as messy and unpredictable as financial markets.
Oh, absolutely essential. You can't survive long in markets if you're constantly wishing they were different or pretending they follow neat, tidy rules when they clearly don't. Black wasn't afraid to look at the chaos and irrationality square in the face.
And Derman connects this attitude, again, back to Spinoza. How so?
Spinoza had this very non-human-centric view of the universe. He didn't believe God made the world for humans, which might sound bleak, but it actually freed Spinoza from a huge philosophical problem.
What problem was that?
The problem of evil, basically. If you believe the world was made for our benefit by a benevolent creator, then you have to constantly try and explain away all the bad stuff, why good people suffer, why there are disasters, why markets crash. It's an endless, impossible task.
But if you don't assume the world is designed for us,
then you don't have to explain away the bad stuff. You just accept that the universe operates according to its own laws, its own nature, and human concerns aren't necessarily its top priority. Spinoza had no time for Leibniz's idea that this is the best of all possible worlds. He just saw this world, the one we actually have, with all its flaws.
accepting reality as it is, not as you wish it were.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Derman sums up this Spinozan realism with a quote from the philosopher Stuart Hampshire, who captured Spinoza's core idea like this. The possibility cannot be greater than the actual.
The possibility cannot be greater than the actual. Okay, let's unpack that. It sounds simple, but feels profound.
It means that no matter how beautiful your theory is, no matter how elegant your model of a perfectly efficient market or perfectly rational investors might be, that's just a possibility, an ideal.
Right.
The actual world, the one with panics and bubbles and biases and stupid regulations and unexpected events, that's the only reality we've got. So the realm of what's actually possible for us to do or understand or predict cannot logically extend beyond the boundaries set by that messy actual reality.
You can't build a strategy based on a world that doesn't exist just because your model says it should. You have to start with what is.
You have to embrace the universe you're actually in, warts and all. You can't just rage against it because it doesn't conform to your elegant equations.
And Derman saw Fischer Black living this principle. Black didn't waste energy complaining that markets should be rational or that academic theories should work perfectly in practice.
No, he was the ultimate pragmatist. He took the world, with all its indignities, as Derman puts it, the irrationality, the bureaucratic nonsense, the failures of models, he took it as given. This is the system we have.
Okay, now how do we operate effectively within this system?
Exactly. He accepted the irrationality not as some annoying deviation from the norm, but as a fundamental parameter of the system itself. He wasn't romantic, he was realistic. And then he figured out how to navigate that reality using the tools he had, like his models, but always knowing they were just tools, just approximations of this messy actuality.
That kind of acceptance must free up a lot of mental energy, right? If you're not constantly fighting reality, you can focus on understanding it and working within it. It feels like a prerequisite for developing that deep intuition we talked about.
I think so too. You can achieve that merging with the system if you're fundamentally rejecting parts of it because they don't fit your ideal. You have to internalize the whole thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So Black represented this powerful combination: deep principles, rigorous thinking, but applied with total pragmatism to the world as it actually is. He knew the model was a toy.
But he accepted that the toy, however flawed, was often the best available way to explore the real territory. He didn't mistake it for the territory itself.
And Derman brings it all together at the end with one last, quite poignant analogy, tying Black's impact back to Dirac.
Yeah, it's a beautiful closing thought. He says that even after Black's death, his absence functions as a presence in quantitative finance.
Like the positron, the hole in the Dirac sea.
Exactly. Just as taking the negative energy electron out leaves a hole in absence that behaves like a real particle with positive properties, the positron, Black's way of thinking, his specific blend of intuition and realism, left a kind of conceptual hole or structure in the field when he was gone.
A structure that continues to shape how people think.
Yes, his absence is a powerful presence. It defines the space around it, a testament to his unique combination of principle and pragmatism. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive, really following Derman's tribute to Fischer Black, has taken us on quite the ride. We went from option pricing to 17th century philosophy with Spinoza, all the way to Dirac and antimatter in physics.
It's covered a lot of ground.
But the core threads seem clear. We've really tried to nail down this crucial difference between models, which are useful analogies, comparisons, intellectual toys, and theories, which aim to describe reality itself axiomatically.
Right. The metaphor versus the thing itself.
We saw Spinoza attempt a theory of emotions, deriving complexity from simple primitives like pain, pleasure, and desire.
Showing that logical structure can be applied even to the messiness of human psychology.
And critically, we explored intuition, not as some mystical gift, but as the hard-won result of immense focused effort developing those muscles of intuition, as Keynes put it about Newton.
It's about that merging of the understander with the understood, achieved through relentless, unsentimental engagement with both the rules and the reality of a domain.
So I think the big takeaway for anyone listening, whether you're in finance or science or business or any complex field really, is that true mastery seems to come from that combination. The unafraid hard thinking, the deep immersion, the development of intuition, and the unsentimental realism to accept the world as it is.
You have to put in the incredibly hard work to internalize the system, the formalism, and the content until you achieve that intuitive grasp. That's where the breakthroughs happen.
And the examples of Dirac and Newton are powerful reminders that often that intuitive leap, that conceptual understanding, comes first. The proof, the model, the equations they sometimes follow later, just to explain or verify the insight already gained.
The theory births the model, not the other way around, in those truly fundamental advances.
Which leaves us with a question, maybe a challenge for you listening. You've built up your own expertise, your own intimate knowledge in your field through hard work. How often do you really trust that? How often do you let your deep earned intuition guide your first steps, your explorations, before you demand the spreadsheet proof or the statistical validation?
And maybe think about the tools you use every day, the frameworks, the models, the spreadsheets. Which of those are genuinely useful toys, metaphors that help you navigate? And are there any you might have started treating, maybe unconsciously, as if they were fundamental theories, as if they were the reality itself? Are you exploring the territory, or have you fallen in love with the map? Something to think about.